Midtown has to be one of the most popular areas of New York City. Most people know it from either visiting New York City or working here in New York City. But is it really worth living in Midtown, and specifically Midtown East? So we're gonna break that down in this video. And at the end, I'm gonna let you decide if you think it's worth living in Midtown East or not. Midtown is one of the most popular areas in New York City, but with that comes a ton of traffic. And what do I mean by traffic? Not only cars, but also pedestrian traffic. Commuters coming in and out of this neighborhood, also tourists coming in and out of this neighborhood. It can be very, very congested, and I want you to be prepared for that. With so many people working and visiting this neighborhood, it can have a very touristy or corporate feel. Now, I do have to say, Midtown West is definitely going to feel more touristy than Midtown East, and that's because there are things like Times Square and the Theater District over there in Midtown West. So more people are going to be visiting that area, but you do still get some tourists in Midtown East and kind of the spillover from that, and also people coming in from the train station Grand Central. Now, there are a lot of office buildings here, so there will be a lot of people coming in and out of the neighborhood for work. So you do need to be prepared for that. Sometimes I do hear from clients as a real estate agent that Midtown East can feel a little bit too corporate, and it doesn't really have enough of a homey feel. Now, I do always say that it depends on what exact block and of course what unit or home that you have in the neighborhood. But I do understand this as well, because depending on where you are, it could feel like you are just living in a giant work zone at times. So keep this in mind if you're looking at the neighborhood. Pay very, very close attention when looking online at different apartments. Pay close attention to where exactly the apartment building is that you're considering, because you may not care if you're in a very, very busy area. But if you do, you may want to consider that before going to see it in person. The good thing about Midtown East is Midtown East has Grand Central. And not only do they have Grand Central, but they just have good transportation options as a whole. Grand Central can take you to pretty much any of the surrounding suburbs except Jersey. Jersey, you do have to go to Penn Station or Port Authority, but you can get upstate New York, you can get to Connecticut, you can now get to Long Island from Grand Central Station. So they have a ton of transportation options. And you can also just catch the subways there that will take you in and around the city. This neighborhood as a whole is serviced very, very well by subways. The only time that you're not going to have good subway options in this neighborhood, and any neighborhood really, is when you are all the way east in a neighborhood. So you're kind of closer to the waterfront. In any neighborhood in New York City, the closer you are to the waterfront, most of the time, there's going to be less subways there. So I do want you to keep that in mind. And this neighborhood also has a ferry terminal. So the ferry can take you to a couple different areas in Manhattan. It can also take you to Brooklyn, Queens, depending on which routes you go. So you do have that option as well. And sometimes it's a little more pleasant going on the ferry than the subways, depending on where you're going in New York City. The dining options are very good in Midtown East, actually. I would say that this neighborhood is not exactly known for its dining. People who live in New York City and people who are coming into the city don't really go out of their way to dine specifically in Midtown East. So it's not really known as one of the top dining destinations in the city. But at the same time, if you really do take a closer look at the dining scene here, I do think that the options are very, very good. Surprisingly, in Midtown East, there are a lot of locals who live in this neighborhood. So what do I mean by locals? There are pockets of this neighborhood where people have lived in this neighborhood for decades and decades, or generations and generations. And a lot of people think that when it comes to Midtown as a whole, whether it's west or east, that people don't have that experience here. People don't stay for a while. It's kind of like a temporary place for people. But if you go to certain neighborhoods in Midtown East, you will actually be surprised to see how many locals live there. Let's talk about the prices of real estate in Midtown East. Now, I would say that you're not exactly getting deals in Midtown East. However, you're typically going to find cheaper apartments in Midtown East than you are going to find downtown. Downtown always as a whole is going to be more expensive than Midtown as a whole. Now, I do want you to keep in mind there's always exceptions to the rules, and it depends on the building, depends on the apartment. But if you're looking at the whole market, you're typically going to find cheaper rents there. When it comes to comparing uptown to midtown, it depends on where you're talking about in uptown versus midtown and building to building. You can typically get a little bit more space in midtown for the same price that you would get for an apartment downtown. So the apartment in downtown would be smaller for the same price that you would be paying. So sometimes that's what draws people to the neighborhood, is that they feel like their money is going a longer way in this neighborhood than it would go downtown. When it comes to the type of homes that you can find here, you're literally going to be able to find a mix of everything, depending on which neighborhood you're talking about, specifically in Midtown East. So you can find high rises, townhomes, walk-ups, doorman buildings, literally everything that you can think of, every type of real estate besides like single family homes you can find in this neighborhood. There's a lot of people that like living close to the Grand Central Station. So if they have a lot of family or friends in the suburbs, or if they have another home in the suburbs, they have a lot of ties to that area, they like being able to get in and out of the city easily by being right there in Midtown East. You can literally walk to the train station there. That's one reason that I see a lot of people being drawn to this neighborhood. Another reason is if they work in Midtown, they find it very, very convenient to be close by to where they work. On the opposite side, there are some people who hate to live close to where they work. So they want nothing to do with living in Midtown East because they might work there. So they want to live in another area in New York City or outside of the city because they don't want to live where they work. So it kind of goes in both ways. Some people don't like to live in Midtown East because they say that the neighborhood is a little bit boring compared to other neighborhoods in New York City. I've spent a lot of time in Midtown East. I definitely don't think it is boring, but this neighborhood isn't really known for something. Like, it's not known for nightlife. It's not known for its dining scene. It's not known for its like recreation or its like outdoor activities. It's not really known for anything. So it doesn't have a strong identity. Midtown East is broken down into so many different neighborhoods. So it might depend on exactly which individual neighborhood you're considering in Midtown East, but it doesn't have a strong pull for people to really go there. It's really just the individual home, like the actual apartment that some people are drawn to in this neighborhood. Picking which New York City neighborhood is such a tough decision. I always say that picking the neighborhood in New York City is more important than picking your actual apartment, because people have such strong ties to the neighborhood that they choose to live in. Typically in New York City, you spend more time in the neighborhood than you do in your home. Most people don't spend a ton of time in their home in New York City for good reasons, because there's just so much to do and so much to enjoy here. I always advise any of my clients to spend time in the neighborhood that they want to live in before moving there. Even if you know Midtown East well and you're considering living in Midtown East, then you should spend time on the actual street, in the actual neighborhood that you want to be in, at all different times of the day too, because that's how you really get a feel for a neighborhood. Something to consider with Midtown East is because there is such strong commuter traffic there, depending on what street you're on or avenue, then you really need to spend the time there too on the weekend and also on the weekday, if that's something that you feel like might affect your decision. So keep that in mind. That's going to really help you decide if it's the right place for you. So I hope this helped you figure out if Midtown East is actually worth it. I would love to know, do you guys think that Midtown East is worth it? Or if you already live in this neighborhood, I would love to hear your opinion right now. As always, I just love hearing from you guys.